Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 116, The Engagement. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Returning to New York, Maxwell tells the family that he has told Fran he loves her. And they don't react until he, of course, clarifies that he didn't take it back this time. Well, then they are thrilled. Well, everyone except for Cece, of course. Cece instills in Fran a fear that Maxwell just told her that he loved her in order to string her along forever. As a pleasant surprise for the audience, at the very least, Maxwell has finally picked up the pace and picked out a ring so he can ask Fran to marry him. Immediately after promising Maxwell that he wouldn't say a word to anyone, Niles pantomimes "I do" for Fran to understand that Maxwell's about to pop the question. And Fran promptly tells her mother, resulting in the news traveling far and wide through the information superhighway that is her mother. Maxwell asks Fran to invite her family to dinner, promising to be back at the house around 8. 8 p.m. comes and goes, and everyone is getting anxious. Even after Maxwell calls to say that he has one more thing to do, something feels off, and Fran goes to the theater to investigate. Fran finds Maxwell in the back alley, a bit bruised and shaken from a mugging. Despite having lost the ring, Maxwell proposes, and finally they are engaged. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
I do not.
All right, would you like to take us to scene 1?
Yes. So we're actually kind of picking up where we left off in the last episode because Fran, Gracie, and Maxwell are returning from their trip to Coruscant. And so we are in that little in-between space between like the exterior outdoor like front door and the interior front door of the little entryway. And so Maxwell's like home sweet home, and Franz says to him, "Thank you for going all the way to Coruscant just to say you love me, Max." And she kind of giggles to herself. And then she goes on to say, "Now, you haven't said it in New York yet, so say it again." And Gracie's like, "Fran, aren't you getting kind of tired of hearing it? Or is it just me?" Maxwell lets Gracie in to the house. And once Gracie's in, Maxwell turns to Fran and he's like, "Fran, yes, I love you." And then they give like a little kiss. Like it's more of a peck, but it's a kiss. So they then go through the like other front door into the actual interior of the home where everybody's gathered. Cece's there, Niles and the kids. And Fran's like, "Hi, everyone. We're home. And guess what? Your father has something he wants to share with you." And Maxwell kind of clears throat and he's like, "I've told Miss Fine I love her." And everybody's just kind of like, "Oh, yeah, wonderful."
Right.
They're no reaction. And at first too, I was like, even Cece, you'd think there would be something. And then it makes sense in the next line because he goes, oh, yes, I didn't take it back. And that's when everybody, like all the kids jump up. "Oh, congratulations." And Niles is like, "Oh, congratulations, Miss Fine." And, saying what wonderful news it is. And Niles kind of goes up to Cece and asks her, "Shall I get you a fork?" And she's like, "For what for?" And he goes, "To stick in yourself. You're done." And that's the opening scene. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
No. Oh, actually, one comment, I guess. I thought Gracie's comment to Fran, like, "Aren't you getting kind of tired of hearing that?" was sort of obnoxious and
Well,
not really
and then it
in
was,
character.
yeah, but it was also interesting because then she also acts surprised in the
Exactly.
living room, and it's like, "Gracie, you were, like, there the entire time. You just heard that exchange 30 seconds ago." Like,
Right. I also thought that was inconsistent and so
yeah.
out of character. That's all I wanted to
Mhm.
say.
Yeah. Can you take us to the office?
Sure. So Maxwell, Fran, and Niles and Cece are all in the office, or Niles comes in and Cece stops him and asks, "Do you want to see something sickening?" And he stops, well, looks at her, says,
Well,
"Well, that was fun." Now what?
Yeah, well, quickly before that happens.
Oh, yeah. So we see Fran is sitting on Maxwell's desk, and
Mhm.
she and Maxwell are sharing a plate of spaghetti, very
Yeah.
Lady and the Tramp like.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so Niles again looks at Cece. Well, that was fun. Now what? Now, and Cece's having none of it, and she's like, "All right, knock it off." And Maxwell sort of pulls away. I'm sorry, Cece, Miss Fine. Would you please try to conduct yourself a little more professionally? And she's like, "Oh no, you conduct yourself first." And he's like, "No, I asked you first." And they get this stupid, uh, doughy-eyed, lovey-dovey nonsense fight over you do it, no, you do it, nah, nah, nah,
Yeah.
nah. And Maxwell finally apologizes to Cece and then asks her, "What is it that you wanted to say?" And Cece's like, "You mean besides yuck?" And then she's like, "Maxwell,
Mhm.
we have business to attend to other than playing kissy face with the help." And Fran jumps in, "Oh, come on, Miss Babcock. I'm not really that much help." And she's like eating the spaghetti and they laugh. Niles is on his way out of the room and he says to Cece, "I'm really going to miss you. I've grown accustomed to your waist." And Cece says to him, what's so sad? I mean, besides the fact that you sleep in Brighton's old bed, Maxwell is going to worm his way out of this like he always does. Nanny Fine is headed for such a fall. God, I don't want to be here to see that. Actually, I do." She takes out a business card, hands it to him. "Here's my Beaver number."
Mhm. Yeah, and just would add for like context a little bit that in this particular scene, like Cece's actually wearing more of a form-fitting outfit than we've seen this season.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, her the actress's baby bump is a lot more prominent in this scene.
Well, that is what happens as pregnancy progresses.
Yeah, but I mean, they weren't hiding it as much, and it was more form than like the other outfits we've seen her in. So I just, yeah, just as a side note, I noticed that in this particular scene when Niles is making that waist comment. But
Fair. I mean,
but yeah.
I'd say that in this entire episode, her attire, it's she's just basically covered. That's all they're
Hmm.
doing.
Hmm. Yeah. So next scene, we're in the kitchen, and Maggie and Fran are coming in from the side door, and Maggie saying, "Oh, Fran, this thing with you and Dad is so romantic. I just hope that someday, the same thing happens to me someday." Well, except for the fact that I'd become a cleaning lady and wait around for 6 years for the man that I love to finally make a move. And Fran's like, "I know. It's like a fairy tale."
Right.
Um, Cece comes in from the swinging door. "Oh, Nanny, fine. Cute coat. How many Muppets had to die for that?"
Mm-hmm.
And side note, didn't she make this joke before?
Thought she did.
Because
I thought
it,
she, because we've
yeah,
seen Fran wearing that type of coat before multiple times.
yeah, I felt like I had heard that joke before.
I mean,
So,
it is also possible that I think I referenced it in one of our
mhm.
recent
Well,
episodes.
that's
And so
fair.
it's possible that I preempted it, but I really also thought we had heard the joke before. So,
Okay. Anyway, Fran responds like, I understand you being bitter, but honey, when you stay too long at the fair, a man loses respect. Another 3 years, and I was out the door myself. And Cece's like, Nanny Fine, I think it is so precious how you think Maxwell saying he loves you means something. Prince's like, well, I think it's pretty obvious that he's not taking it back this time. And Cece's like, oh no, he's not going to take it back. He's going to drag this thing on and on and on until you get disgusted and die. And then she
mm-hmm.
continues, like a cockroach. I was here long before you, and I'll be here long after you're gone. Um,
So
and
it's
then
fun
we,
when you compare yourself to a cockroach. Continue.
oh yeah, I was like, if Niles had been there, he would have been all over that.
Uh-huh.
Now, how did you decide to count this? Like,
I
because
put
we have kind of going into Fran's mind at this
I kept it
point.
all as one scene, but we can do it however you want.
Okay. Um, I might have you chime in a couple of times. I have it, but basically, what we have is kind of that effect of going into it's, like a daydream kind of,
Day
um
nightmare, yeah.
yeah, well, Fran, um, we see her, she's turned away from the camera. We do see that she has some type of, like, sheer glove on, lace glove, and she's holding a thing of lipstick, and she says, kind of like in a little older voice, "Oh, you know how happy you made me when you told me you loved me? Oh, Maxwell, but don't you think it's time we went on to the next level?" And she turns around, and all of the front half of her hair is gray.
Mhm.
She has thick kind of Yetta glasses that make her eyes, like, very large. She has, to put it bluntly, like, saggy breasts.
Like,
Her hips are a bit
ridiculously
bigger.
saggy. Yeah.
Yes. And then she also has lipstick all over her, like, front teeth. And, she's kind of like, toddling along, like, she's very old, right?
Mhm.
And, um, and of course, she's walking towards Maxwell, who's kind of in the foyer, like, at the little round table, trying to look at mail, and he has his magnifying glass because he too is just very old at this point. And Fran, says to him, I'm not going to be 69 forever. And Maxwell, though, is like, "Now listen, Miss Fine, Franny, we can't just jump into things. Um, I'm awfully worried about the children." And
Correct.
Fran's like, "First of all, we can't jump, period. Second of all, whose children are you worried about? Yours, theirs, or theirs?" At this point, Niles enters from the back, also, old, but he's in a wheelchair. He's still trying to clean though. Like, he has some type of, like, broom or Swiffer or something ahead of him. And he also has his little feather duster. And he's trying to go around the table. And they're like, "Oh, around you go, buddy." But he kind of flies off. And they're like, "Oh, come on, little boy, come back." Um, and Then Cece comes in through the front door. She too is older. And she has a very wide mouth,
Yeah, I think
like
it's like showing that she'd had like plastic surgery or
plastic.
something
Yeah.
and it didn't go well.
Yes. Um, but anyway, she also has like an exaggerated, all of them have like the elderly voice, right? And
Yes.
she has one as well. And Maxwell, though, is telling Cece, no, he's not going to some cat party for cats. And Cece's like, "Well, it's not every day, a show has a billion performances." So again, even in his old age, Cats is haunting Maxwell.
Yup.
Uh, and anyway, Fran kind of is like, telling Cece, "Well, why don't you take your husband?" And this is when Niles chimes in, "I don't want to." And then he goes on to explain, one drunken stupor in 2006, and he's still paying for it.
Yup.
Uh, yeah. But anyway, Fran is trying to put her foot down with Maxwell. "I'm not going to wait around forever. Another 3 years and I'm out." And she kind of like stumbles a bit, right? And they
Mhm.
hold her up. Uh, but yeah, so then we go back outside from this daydream nightmare, and Niles is actually kind of the one who gets her out of it by going like, "Miss Fine." And Fran, snaps out of it, looks down, grabs her breast. "Oh, thank God." She
Yup.
realizes that she was just thinking. Um, and anyway, uh, she now, though, because Cece has planted this idea in her brain, had this kind of like daydream nightmare. Um, she asks Niles, like, is it possible that he said it to string her along forever? And Niles is like, "No, of course not." Although he isn't very good with commitment. And we learn that Niles is still on a week to week employment basis. And
Mhm.
of course, that doesn't really do much to help quell, Fran's worry. But then she's still like, "Oh, no, 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 it's ridiculous. It's uh, I'm gonna not think of what Miss Babcock said. She's out of my mind." But then she kind of turns around and tells Niles, "If she asks you out for drinks in 2006, don't go."
Mm-hmm.
And that's the scene. Would you like to add anything?
I would not. So Maxwell is hanging out by his office and he asks Niles to come in because he wants to tell him something. And so Niles goes into the office and Maxwell asks him, "Can you keep a secret?" And Niles says, "Well, I'm good until I meet another person," which,
Mhm.
okay, cool. That's not really indicative of
Yeah.
being good at keeping secrets, as we
I
know,
mean, at least he's honest, right?
I suppose. Um, And Maxwell says, "I'm serious. This concerns Miss Fine." And Niles is like, "Oh no, you're not going to disappoint her again." And Maxwell's like, "Not unless you think she'd be disappointed by this." He reaches over, picks something up off his desk. It's a little velvet box. And he shows it, he has it open and he shows it to Niles, and there's a large diamond ring in it. And Niles says, "Oh, sir, it's beautiful. This is the happiest day of my life. You know, it's funny how you picture it, but you're never really prepared for it." Maxwell asks if Niles thinks that Fran would like the engagement ring. And Niles says, "Well, she'll be speechless." And Maxwell's like, "Well, maybe I should give it to her now then." And they both laugh. And he's like, "Seriously, Niles, I want your word that you won't say anything." And Niles says, "On my honor, sir, I won't say a word, I swear. And sir, congratulations." And he says, "Thank you." Maxwell says, "Thank you." And Niles steps out, closes the door, says, "Yes." And
Mhm.
just as Fran is walking by, and Fran is like, "Niles, what happened? Did Miss Babcock die?" And Niles like, "No, no, better. Well, not better, but good." And Fran's like, "What?" He's like, "Oh, I can't say a word." And then instead of saying anything further, he starts miming, like holds his two fingers, indicating two words. And Fran's like, "Okay, okay, good. First word." And he points at his eye. He's like, I. And he taps his, yes, taps his nose, yes. She's like, "Okay, good. Second word." Wow, okay. And so he starts like poking at the like corner of his eye. And Fran's like, "I crud. I got a cold in my eye. I boogers. I goo. I goo." And he's like, he taps on his ear, just indicates sounds like, "I goo. I goo. I goo. I Jew. I'm a Jew. I'm a Jew." And now it's just like, "No." Shakes his head. She's like, "No." And so he like takes her like face in his hand to try to change the way she's pronouncing "I goo" to "I do." "I do."
Mhm.
Niles nods. He do, says Niles.
Yeah, yeah, and there's, I think, a Yahoo at the end too.
Yeah. One thing I want to say is I feel like they should have had that nonverbal conversation outside of not outside of Maxwell's office.
Yeah. Yep. But it's classic.
It
Classic
is.
them.
Do you have anything you want to add?
I do not.
All right.
Uh,
Would you like to take us to Grand Central Station?
yes. And by that, it's the Sheffield kitchen, but Fran is on the phone calling Sylvia. And Sylvia answers, and Fran's like, "I'm getting married." And Sylvia's like, "Sorry, miss, you got the wrong number." And she goes to put down her, hang up. And Fran's like, "Ma, it's me. Mr. Sheffield's going to propose." And so, of course, Sylvia's like, "Oh, I'm so happy." But in the meantime, there's a beeping noise. And she's like, "Hold on, I'm getting beeped." And so on our screen, we go from just having a split screen of Fran and Sylvia, excuse me, to also having then who we later find out is Mr. Chung, the owner of the Chinese restaurant. He's on screen and he's telling Sylvia, that she ordered too much food. Like, you want 4 orders of ribs? And Sylvia's like, "I could take my business across the street to Mr. Lee. He's not judgmental." And then she's like, "I can't really talk right now. My daughter's being proposed to." And Mr. Chung's like, "Oh, get out of town." And because he obviously is in the know as to who Fran is and what the lore is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just then he's like, "Oh, wait, I'm getting beeped." And so we add on to the screen Val, who is calling into Mr. Chung's, and she's asking where her food's at because it's already been like an hour. And he explains to her that he was talking to Miss Fine and her daughters being proposed to. So then, of course, everything just kind of starts magnifying in terms of people calling different people, because we see on the screen like people's mouths moving even if we can't hear them. But we
Mm-hmm.
have, for instance, um, you know, uh, Sylvia reaching out to Yetta, and Sylvia's telling Yetta, Mr. Sheffield's going to pop the question, and Yetta's like, well, I hope you say no, it'll kill Franny, which is again hilarious that she misinterpreted that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then of course Sylvia gets another beep, and she's like, oh, hold on, it's Grand Central Station today, and it's the rabbi. And he's saying, mazel tov to your daughter. And then again, we see all these screens. We then see Sylvia, I think it's Sylvia calling Niles
Yep.
and asking, is it true? And then everybody on screen says simultaneously, let's just hope he doesn't take it back. And then everything, like all the other people go away, and it's just now Fran and Sylvia back on the screen. And Fran's like, Ma, you disconnected me. I was going to tell you it's a big secret. I'm not even supposed to know yet. And Sylvia's like, Momola, please, who am I going to tell?
Right.
And that is the scene. Would you
Yeah.
like to add anything?
No, I'm good.
Yep. It
So
really is, though, a game of telephone in that scene.
it is, except it worked. The message got across.
Yep.
Unlike when you
You
actually play
did.
telephone and it becomes something completely garbled.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Okay.
So
Would you like to take us to the living room?
yeah, so Fran and Niles are in the living room, and Niles warns that he's coming. And so Fran grabs, the remote, and uh, Maxwell says, Miss Fine, there's something I want to ask you. And she says, yes. And she presses the remote to put on romantic sounding music. He's like, I wanted to ask if you'd like to have dinner tonight. And so she pauses the music. All right, how about Italian? He's like, no, this is a rather special occasion. I've booked the Rainbow Room, so why don't you ask your family to join us? I think they should all be there. And he's like, now, I'm going to be tied up until the theater around 7:30, so I'll see you here around 8. She says, okay, 8 o'clock it is. And then the doorbell rings, so she says she'll get it. And she's like, unless it's a surprise you don't want. Oh, he's gone. So she opens the door.
Mhm.
It's Val. Hi. And Val's like, I'm so happy for you, and starts pelting her with rice.
Cooked rice.
Yes. And Fred's like, Ma told you? And she's like, no, I heard it from Mr. Chung at at the Rickshaw Hunan Palace. By the way, he sent this. Congratulations. And Fred's like, shh, I'm technically not even supposed to know myself yet. Mr. Sheffield wants to pop the question in front of everyone tonight at the Rainbow Room. You're invited tonight. And Val's like, Fran, after all this time, I can't believe he's finally going to pop the question. I was like, oh, I know. Val's like, well, to tell you the truth, I was worried he was never really going to do it. Fran's like, I know. Val's like, quite frankly, it was getting pretty pathetic. Fran's like, I know, Val. Now, would you just act surprised? And Val just puts on a surprise face, and Fran's like, not now.
Mm-hmm.
Poor
Yep.
Val.
Yeah. But she got invited along to the Rainbow Room. That's nice.
True.
She's, I guess, family. So then we cut to the next scene, and Brighton has his video recorder, and he and Fran are coming down the stairs, and Fran is dressed up for the evening. Brighton saying, "Show me the love, baby. You're switched on. You're smashing. Oh, behave." I'm not doing the Austin Powers impression, but that, he is. And Fran's like, "Oh, Brighton, I want you to get every angle to capture this. Higher, honey. I want you to capture happy, not hippie." But anyway, Fran goes and greets Sylvia and Yetta, who are already there. They're also dressed up, and she's like, "Ma, Yetta," and they get together, and they're hugging, and they're saying, "Can't believe this." And yet is like, "He was so young." And Sophie's like, "No one died, Ma. Fran is going to get proposed to." And yet it's like, "Oh, thank God. Finally, these 3 kids will have a father." And she points to the couch where Val, Gracie, and Maggie are sitting. And then anyway, Fran's now talking kind of with Niles, and she's saying, she only wishes that Mrs. Babcock was around to share in the joy. And in comes Cece through their front door. "Hello, hello." And Fran kind of mouths to Niles, "Thank you." And Cece asks Niles what's the emergency, and she looks around and, oh, was there some type of hostile takeover?
Hostile
Um,
makeover.
oh, I thought she said takeover, but okay, that makes sense too.
No, she said, you've
And
all been victim of a hostile makeover.
And then okay. And then anyway, Fran though starts by addressing to everyone. "Now, when Mr. Sheffield springs it on me, you all have to like act surprised, be convincing." And for like at this point, Cece is the only one who is like not in the know. And she kind of like, "Hear what?" And so I believe it's Niles who whispers to her.
Yes, it is.
Um, and so she, of course, gasps, and Fran points to her, gestures to Cece, and she goes, "I.e." And
Mm-hmm.
I know I was impressed that she used that.
Yeah.
Some
Um,
Latin there. So yeah. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
no, I'm good.
Okay. Can you take us to the next scene?
So we're still in the living room, and we've been waiting now for a while, and everyone's sort of a little concerned, exasperated, or annoyed. And Gracie asks Frank, "Can't we take our coats off? It's been half an hour. How much longer do we have to wait?" And Sylvia testily says, "No one has waited as long as I have. Leave the coat on." And Cece is actually enjoying the situation. She points out to Fran that, maybe you should take up knitting. Maxwell's going to need some warm socks for those cold feet. And Fran's like, "I know what you're getting at, but he's not going to be backing out this time. He'll be here. That man loves me. I feel it in my heart of hearts." She grabs Niles by the lapels. "Swear you saw that ring." At which point
Mm-hmm.
the phone rings and Fran answers, "Hello?" "Oh, relax. It's him." And Max is like, "Fran, I know I'm running late, but I'm going to need a little bit more time here. There's just one more thing I have to do." And Fran's like, "Okay, honey, don't worry. We'll be here waiting." And she hangs up. And Cece decides to chime in again. "Nanny, fine. Don't be depressed. At least Maxwell gave you a ring." "Ring?" And she points at the phone. No,
Mm-hmm.
she holds up the phone to Fran.
Yes.
Do you,
Yes.
do you have anything you want to add?
I do not.
All right, take us to the theater, please.
So we're in the theater, and Maxwell's kind of sitting down on the stage, right? He has a picture of his late wife, Sarah, in his hand, and he's talking to the picture. And he says, "Well, Sarah, my love, you'll always be in my heart." And he explained she's his first love, the mother of, their children. But he's met someone very special who he loves a great deal. The kids are crazy for her. I think you'd like her. She reminds me of, well, nobody you've ever met." He thought better
Right.
of it. But he goes on to say that he thinks that Sarah would be very happy for them. So after that kind of moment of just him talking to, his late wife's picture, he gets up. He's getting ready to leave. The janitor Jake comes through, and you know, Maxwell kind of tells him he's going to go get engaged to his nanny. And Jake's like, "The one with the voice?" And Maxwell's like, "The voice?" And Jake's like, "Oh, you're in love."
Right.
And anyways, they say goodnight. Um, Maxwell exits the stage door, where there's a guy out there who asks Maxwell for the time, and Maxwell says it's 8:15. And then a couple of other guys kind of come up behind that guy because that guy didn't let Maxwell by. And, you see the realization dawn on Maxwell what the situation truly is. And he even says, "Oh, you don't really want the time, do you?" And then we just kind of see them like slowly kind of menacing onto him.
Right.
Uh, is there anything you'd like to add to that scene?
No.
Okay. Can you take us back to the Sheffields?
Sure. So we see Niles is asleep on the couch, and Yetta, thinking he's dead, goes and places a rose on his folded arms. And she comments to Brighton that they did such a good job on him. He looks like he's just sleeping peacefully. And Brighton's like, Yetta, he's not dead. And Yetta's like, oh, it's always hardest for the young ones to accept. And then I think she points to some flowers and says that she and Sammy sent that. Um,
Mhm.
and Brighton's like, look, yeah. And she's like, it's the nicest one. Um,
Well, he says he starts to like he's about to correct her again, stops himself, and then says to Yetta, "It's the nicest one."
oh,
So
sorry. Yes.
that was kind of sweet of him to just be like, "Okay, I'll just play along."
Yeah, which I think is actually what you're supposed to do with people who are senile or whatnot. Sometimes
Yeah.
you're supposed to do that. Anyway, did you count this all as one scene or did you cut it there?
No, I counted it as one scene.
Okay, cool. So Fran is looking out the door anxiously, and Sylvia has approached her, and Fran's like, look, he'll be here, Mom. He wouldn't do this to me. And Sylvia's like, sweetheart, you know you can always come home. We'll redo your room exactly like it was. I even saved your old flash dance comforter set. And they're like walking away from the door, and Fran's like, the one with the two pillow shims that say, what a feeling. And Cece approaches with a wheeling clothes rack. Nanny, fine, listen, I've packed a few of your things to make the transition easier. And then she says, next, jackets, sweaters, and slutty skirts. And Fran's like, no, Ma, no, I know him. He loves me. And he would have been here by now. Something must have happened to him. Something must be wrong. I've got to go find him. She puts her coat on and goes out the door.
Mhm.
Go figure out what had happened.
Yeah.
You have anything you want to add?
And so no, we, pick up with her running into that same kind of alleyway by the side, the backstage door. She goes up to the door and is, like, knocking on it, Mr. Sheffield," right? Was it that or it wasn't
Yeah.
Max, was it? Which way was it?
Yeah,
I don't
no,
know.
she was knocking on the door, Mr. Sheffield, Mr. Sheffield.
Okay,
Which
okay.
also, side note, if you're about to get engaged to someone, perhaps that would be a good time to be on first name basis in front of other people.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
aside.
because she called him Max all the rest of the episode. But
No,
anyway,
she didn't.
uh
She also called him Mr. Sheffield earlier when talking to the family about like what to expect at dinner that night.
oh, okay, yeah.
Which again,
It was
sorry, I should have
mixed
made the
'cause
comment
at the
then,
very
but
beginning of the episode, she did say but anyway,
yeah,
whatever. She's knocking, but then she hears, by the garbage cans outside a noise, and she's kind of, like, startled, but she turns like, she looks, and Mr. Sheffield's on the ground, like, amongst the garbage, looking, worse for wear, and she's like, "Oh my god," and she goes to him, and he explains, he got mugged, he's so sorry, um, he's sorry he's so late. He should have fought back harder. And she's trying to reassure him, like, no, in that kind of situation, you're supposed to just give them whatever they want. So, that less likelihood of them hurting you and stuff like that. In the meantime, he's like checking his pockets and he has the realization they got the ring. And of course, Fred immediately like, I'll kill them.
and then
But
she said, "What
anyway,
ring?"
yeah, well, at first she said, what ring?
No, she
After,
starts by saying, "Yeah." She says, "I'll kill
I'll
them."
kill them. And then what ring? Like
Right.
trying to remain surprised. And Maxwell's very apologetic. Like he wanted to make this to be the most romantic night for her. Um, but then he like starts feeling around and he finds like a can and he like takes off the
Top
little
top.
tab and he holds it up, like, he actually starts putting it on her ring finger and says, "Fran, will you marry me?" And she's like, "Oh, Max, it's all so sudden."
Mm-hmm.
And then she's like, "What do you think?" And then they kiss,
Mm-hmm.
and they're engaged. Is
Um,
there anything you'd like to add to that scene?
yeah, I feel like it was sort of anticlimactic the way they did that. Um,
Yeah, um,
we can
in
say this for
terms of,
later if
like,
you want, but it just
yeah,
like to me, the fact that she says, "What do you think?" instead of a resounding yes, um,
mhm,
was disappointing. Especially
yeah,
considering this is something she's been working for years.
yeah, yep. Uh, would you like to take us through our little montage at the end of the
Yeah, so we
episode?
have a montage of Fran and Maxwell kissing, which starts with them kissing in the alleyway, in this episode, the engagement. We see them kiss in Shopaholic at the mall in New Jersey. We see Fran kissing him in the hallway outside of her parents' house in the two Mrs. Sheffields. We see him lying her down on his desk, on the desk in his office in the episode Me and Mrs. Joan. We see them kiss at the like after um after party, uh opening night after party in Sunday in the Park with Fran. We see them kiss on the staircase in the house in the episode of Stars Unborn. We see Fran kissing him on the chair in the living room in A Kiss Is Just a Kiss. We see them kissing on the other couch in Your Feet's Too Big. We see them kissing on the stoop in the episode of The Tart with Heart. We see them making out in London in the episode Fran's Gotta Have It. Um, and then we also see them kissing in the hospital next to Niall's hospital bed in the morning after. And then we cut to a scene of Fran sitting in the kitchen on the phone saying, "I'm getting married." And that's the episode.
Mhm. Yep. And how many of those did you have to look up?
One.
Exactly. You're so on it, Debbie.
Just one. Um,
Which one was it that you had to look up?
it was
Do you recall?
the tart with heart. Because I knew it
Okay.
was the episode where Fran had a conversation with her mother about using her good looks to get things, and there was a cable man involved, and so I was able to find it that way. I just wasn't certain if it was that episode. I knew it was early in season 4. I just wasn't
Mhm,
sure which episode. So
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So, before we dive into our shticks, did you have any kind of, like, overarching thing you wanted to talk about?
I thought that this was sort of, I mean, I've already said that I thought Fran's response to Maxwell's question of "Will you marry me?" was lackluster at best.
Mhm.
I didn't really care for that. Yeah, I just wanted to say that again. I think I can save the rest of my commentary for our shticks.
Okay. Well, because one of the things I kinda wanted to discuss with you
Mm-hmm.
is, like, do you like, what was I mean, okay. Did it have to happen right then and there? Like, for us as an audience, good, because we finally got there.
Right.
But, like, in terms of, like, did it have to be that night? You know what I mean?
No,
There was
no,
no special significance that we are aware of that
correct.
day. So it's not like he, was down to the wire. Because I was like, okay, you finished by saying you want it to be the most romantic night for her, and then you scrounge around and take off the tab of a can and
Right.
propose literally in the garbage in an alleyway.
Yeah, it's
And
not very romantic.
no. Um, so anyway, that was my just kind of question for this episode is like, did it have to happen right then and there? Um, Again, it's a sitcom, so yes, in that world, sure.
Yeah, but
But
no,
in
I
the
see
real
your
world,
point.
if you had just gotten mugged and all of that, you might be like, "Okay, I'm still gonna ask, but maybe on a different night."
Yeah, yeah, I agree, but also like kind of the opposite point. Like he finally tells her that he loves her and doesn't take it back, and so his immediate response is to propose to her.
Yeah, that's also, like,
The
what
timing
I was
seems
thinking too
odd.
timing-wise, is that what, they've only gone on 2 dates? And I know
Yeah,
it's different. I know it's different because they have lived with each other for 5 years, um, but still, like, it's a slow burn and then a very quick
correct.
engagement.
It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, like maybe they should spend some time calling each other Fran and Max in front of other people. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I guess if only maybe and this could be it, I know, like, sometimes you hear with, like, older people, things might move a little quicker, but also it might be that if Max has so much trouble making commitments, it might be that once he is committed, though, he's all in. Like, so to get there is the struggle, but once he's made up his mind, for sure? I don't know.
I I mean, yeah.
I mean, he's taken it back before, so,
Yes.
but anyway. Anyway, the timing is just kinda screwy is what I think we both agree on, right?
Agreed.
Okay. Do we wanna go ahead and jump into favorite fashion?
We do. Did you have any favorite fashion this episode?
I think she looked really nice in her engagement dress.
Would you like to describe it? I agree for the record. That was top of my
Yeah.
list too.
It was a sleeveless, floor-length fitted, like, gown with a lot of big floral pattern, like, on it,
Hmm.
like,
Big green
uh
leaves, red and
mhm,
pink roses.
yes. And it looked great, and she had her hair kind of up,
Hmm.
um, curly, and yeah, I thought, like, it was just very flattering on her. What
Agreed.
about you?
That was my favorite thing she wore in this episode. Um,
Mhm.
the other outfit that I did like was the red, black, and white. She wears like a
Mhm.
black turtleneck, black tights, black heels, and then like a red dress with a black and white like insignia thing on one side. I just really
Mhm.
like that as well.
Did
Um,
you notice that Val kind of had the same kinda color scheme when she came over to congratulate her?
I did not.
Yeah, they both were having that kind of red, white, black color scheme.
Hmm, I did not
Yeah.
notice. Was there other fashion you wanted to talk about?
I mean, just as you mentioned, we've seen that that orange,
Coat,
uh
Muppet coat.
yes. How would you yeah, I mean, it's like hairy?
I
How
I'd call it. I would have just called it the Muppet coat.
yeah,
Fuzzy. That's not right.
but it's like has long stringy, right?
Yeah, and we've
Feathery, but
seen
not feathers,
it. Yeah,
but
it's not feathers. It's like Muppet, which hence
yeah.
Stacey's comment: how many Muppets had to die for that coat? She wore a similar coat. I think she might have worn that coat in the episode Love is a Many Blundered Thing, because I
Mhm,
remember she wore that. I think she put that on over her like white painting suit to go try to paint over the billboard she got for Maxwell in Times Square. Um,
mhm.
but I feel like we've seen that coat before. Anyway,
Yeah, I definitely think so. But yeah. Any other fashion you wanted to talk about?
no, I'm good.
Okay. So some notable New Yorkers.
There weren't that
Um,
many this week, right?
yeah, I was gonna say that too. Like, I don't feel like there are that many. Again, there's like kind of some references to some movies. For instance, The Lady and the Tramp Spaghetti Kiss. Um, they're not outright saying Lady and the Tramp, but anybody familiar with that reference would have recognized it, right?
Right.
Have we talked about Lady and the Tramp before?
We have not. Um, it was an animated film by Disney, which is in 1955. It came out in 1955, apparently. Um, it's and I quote, an animated musical romance film produced by Walt Disney and released by Buena Vista Film Distribution, according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Mhm. And then again, you mentioned Muppets. uh, And I think
We've
we've talked about the Muppets
we
before.
have. We definitely
Um,
have.
yeah. And then again, we have like there's a couple of scenes I don't think there are any
Agreed.
like ones, and then later
I have
we
like
have
6 for the entire
total.
episode. Yeah.
Because like I'm like looking through, and I mean I already mentioned like Brighton does that whole Austin Powers kind of
Thing.
reference. Yeah. Have we talked about Austin Powers before? I don't
I
think
think we
so.
have.
Oh, okay. I'm assuming it must have come out around that time because we've already talked about the Rainbow Room before
We
because that was
definitely
brought
have.
up in previous episodes.
Yeah, so
Uh,
according to our friends at Wikipedia, Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery came out in 1997, which is right
okay,
around
so
the same
yeah,
time.
yeah, very timely then as to that. And then I mean we have a Flashdance reference, which I feel like we've talked about, maybe.
I don't think we've covered Flashdance. It was a 1983 R-rated movie, which was about an amateur dancer who dreamt of studying at the Pittsburgh Ballet School while she worked as both a welder in a factory during the day and at as a dancer in a club at night. That's according to our
And the
friends
song
at IMDb.
"What a Feeling" was in that movie.
Correct.
And then I mean, like the last, like the montage is played over the song "Cherish" by association. At
Mm-hmm.
least that's what the closed captioning said when I watched it. What
Yeah,
was
so
like? Did you have anything else?
Grand Central Station is the first one
Oh,
I have.
mm-hmm.
It is an ornate train station in Manhattan, which is, and I quote, one of NYC's premier attractions, offering a compelling blend of rich history, architectural details, exquisite dining, and diverse shopping. And that's according to our friends at grandcentralterminal.com.
Okay. Anything else?
Raisinets, which we've talked about previously. And then you already mentioned we talked about the Rainbow Room. Um, I think we've talked about it multiple times. Um, there's a reference to Rickshaw Hunan Palace, which
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that was meant to be an actual reference to something. There used to be a rickshaw dumpling bar in New York, but it closed in, I think, 2013. And it looks like there is a rickshaw Chinese restaurant located somewhere in California. So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Then I'm out.
Overall, yeah, not a lot this week.
Mm-mm. No, I think they were just so focused on getting us to the point where Fran and Max were engaged that they kind of
Mm,
dropped the ball on some other things.
yeah. Okay. So some Yiddish cup.
So we have Rabbi. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
that is the religious leader in the synagogue. Rabbi translates to teacher. And the tradition is that we value education so much that the more educated your rabbi is, the higher paid he or she will be. Um, the next one was Mazel Tov, which we've talked about before. It means congratulations, or as Fran put it in season 1, pip pip in Yiddish. And then Mamala, which we talked about adding the la at the end of a word or a name as a term of affection, sign of endearment.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm out, unless I missed any.
No, I mean, I just know you've mentioned before that connection between like Jewish people and Chinese food.
We've talked about
S-
that at length
yeah, that just it's like a Chinese restaurant that's calling Sylvia.
because she ordered too much food,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like we all struggle with when we order Chinese food. We want
It's
more
good
and
stuff.
more because it's yummy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so are we ready for some 90s nostalgia?
Yes, we are. Would you like to start?
I mean, I'm sure you have it as well, the beeper number
Yep.
that Cece gives Niles to notify her quickly so she can be there.
Mm-hmm. Old cars.
Mhm.
Um, to me, it seemed very dated when Fran thought that Maxwell was going to propose to her in the living room, that she was using like that remote. Like I feel like
Yes.
nowadays most people would just use their phone.
Yeah. Yeah. And likewise with, Fran uses a cordless phone to call her mom. I think her mom's was still corded, right?
I think so.
Maybe. But like that whole sequence of people calling each other, again, that would be like a text or like a social media, whatever.
Or a message from Seamless, Grubhub, or whichever food app
Yeah,
you ordered your food from.
exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that whole sequence. Anything else?
Just this, it struck me that Maxwell was mugged. I know violent crimes like that still occur, but my understanding is New York City's crime rate is significantly lower now than it was in the 90s. So to me,
Okay.
that is a major plot point. Seemed perhaps a little dated.
Mhm.
And then I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah, and then again too, like the fact that he did give her a ring, as Cece pointed out, that again I feel like would have been like a text, like, "Hey, we're running late, be there in a
Right.
bit," or something. Sorry, this is not 90s nostalgia, but like speaking of time, the original plan was him to see her at 8 at the house. And then when he gets mugged, it's 8:15. But that's already after Gracie mentions that it's been 30 minutes. So I guess it could be said that they were ready early in anticipation of leaving, but still, like as it is, there's only like a 15-minute delay.
That's a good point.
So
I mean,
just timing is a
yeah,
little, again, off, I feel like.
yeah, we've had timing issues with this show before. So,
Oh,
and
Brighton's camera.
oh yes, that is
Again,
90s nostalgia.
very much would have been just his like phone.
Correct.
Or like a nicer camera, if he was vlogging or whatever. But but
Right.
yeah. Okay. Anything else? Okay.
Uh,
Would you like
I
to
was going to
go
ask
on to
you.
the discount?
I was going to ask you if you wanted to update our kiss count.
Well, again, just as a reminder, last time we were at 36. And this week, how many kisses did we have, Debbie?
3.
Yes. So we are now at 39. Woohoo!
Woohoo! Again, it's
And
only
again,
taken us almost 5 full seasons.
yeah.
Almost.
And we did get to relive some of those other kisses as Debbie went through, but these are the new ones that we saw.
Correct.
And one was like, again, I would categorize the first one as kind of like a peck. The second was that spaghetti Lady and the Tramp spaghetti kind of kiss. And then the last one was like, okay, we're engaged.
Right.
So,
Also, I'll point out that the montage we see was not in like particular, like in chronological order, which I thought was
mhm,
an odd choice. Like their first
mhm.
kiss was in the episode Sunday in the Park with Fran. Um, but that was like in the middle of the montage.
Hmm. Interesting. They're just like, oh, we'll just put them all together
Right.
in any which way.
Yeah.
Okay. So do we have any future fun?
Yes, we do. So I guess the first thing I'll start with is Sarah's ghost makes an appearance at the end of season 5.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so we get to actually meet Sarah briefly. But don't worry, the only person who sees her is Maxwell.
Okay.
We do meet her parents in season 6. And they, shall we say, are not as enamored with Fran as everyone else is.
Mhm.
So that's kind of unfortunate. Um, let's see. Fran's like daydream nightmare, whatever we're calling it, is actually more on point than I think she realizes. But thankfully not about Maxwell stringing her along forever. It's more predictive, at least vis-a-vis Niles and Cece. So first, we do learn later that Cece does get Botox, and she just happens to get the Botox from Maggie's boyfriend's father, under an assumed name. Um,
Mm,
but Niles and Cece do end up, shall we say, being involved in season 6. I won't say
okay.
the extent of that, but they do. And then finally, Fran and Maxwell's engagement does get called off multiple times, but they do eventually get married. And
Woo!
yeah, I don't know if I should say more. They do married people things. So that's all I
Okay.
have for now.
Okay. So now it's time for our episode ratings. As a reminder to our lovely listeners, we rate each episode from 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. We always give like the caveat, like, this is for fun. It's arbitrary. It's, we reserve the right to adjust our scores at a later time.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe this week I go first.
Thank goodness. Yes.
Um, I don't know if this will surprise you, but despite some of the lapses in logic, I'm going to give it a 5
All right. Explain.
because they're engaged.
That's it.
Well, and plus there wasn't as much of objectionable whatever. I liked the nightmare thing where like Cece and Niles are together. I think that's hilarious. Because again, they've been dropping those hints all throughout the seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, it was very much them. The fact that Niles immediately let Fran know, and Fran immediately let Sylvia know, and everybody kind of knew.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I mean that seemed in character.
Yep.
Again, it could have been a bit different of an ending, but there is something sweet about them having a moment together, like just the two of them. It's not flashy or whatever, but it's getting to the heart of the matter, which is them wanting to be together.
That's fair.
So, so yeah, so there wasn't, again, there are a couple of comments I wasn't too happy with, but not anything that really made me like deduct a lot, you know? So I think that's my first 5 of the season.
It is.
uh, so yeah, your turn, Debbie.
I'm really torn. Like, part of me wants to give it a very high rating for the exact reason you identified, which is they're finally freaking engaged. And we've been waiting and waiting and waiting for this to happen. However, in our discussion of it, it does kind of bother me how how he jumps from finally being willing to acknowledge that he loves her to let's get married immediately. Um, and also her like sort of lackluster response. I don't really
Mhm,
like that the writers put them through this the way they did. Like, I think it would have been better for us to watch, like, if they'd actually gone to the fancy dinner he had planned and he got to say something sweet and romantic to her in front of her, their family, their friends, etc. Like, that would have been nicer than he got mugged and then he gives her a pop top. Um,
mm,
I very much enjoyed Niles and his pantomime, even though again I think he probably should have done it not in front of Maxwell's office door because now
mhm.
Maxwell probably should have heard their excitement. Um, but I do like this episode more than the episode last week, but less than the episode the week before that. I
Yeah,
think I'm
well,
giving it
and Yetta was funny with Shmooey. She didn't call him Shmooey this episode, but they do have like a
good chemistry.
yeah, but also the fact that she in her head is still like these are Fran's kids and they'll
Yep,
finally get a father.
yep. Um, yeah, I mean, Yetta usually adds to the an episode score. I don't know. I think I'm just gonna split the baby and I'm gonna give it a 4.5.
Okay.
So yeah.
Very fair.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, in that case, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next time when we'll be discussing episode 117, The Dinner Party.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.